We go. All right, people, welcome to the Chaos Report. My name is Dave. Special guest today. You know him as the guy who's trying to crack the code and destroy the WHO. We love him for that. It's James Roguski. How are you, James?
I'm doing great, Dave. And as we record this, the WHO is having still more secret meetings. Although they did have a meeting on Monday, the 12th, that was very entertaining. They made it very, very clear that they're not all getting along as nicely as they would like, and things are not moving smoothly for them. And so, that's in many ways good news. There's arguments between rich and poor nations and nations that want this and nations that want that. But there's a saying that I'm sure you're familiar with. I don't remember who said it. Maybe you do. That all politics is local.
Yeah.
And so there's a handful of things going on that I want to talk about where people are misrepresenting, misunderstanding, misallocating, all kinds of misinformation out there that I want to try to contain a little bit, because here's what's going on in the land of the WHO, but then I want to bring it home. Um, the two tracks that have been going forward for the last year or so, one that most people call the pandemic treaty, and then the other one, which are amendments to the international health regulations. Everybody gets them all mixed up. And so the treaty has had many, many names. It was a working draft back in July sometime. Then they had a conceptual zero draft, and then they had that was in November. Then they had the zero draft, which was in February, and they were hoping to get a first draft at their World Health Assembly, but I think they failed. And what they ended up doing was asking all of the nations to put new information into the mix. Okay, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want? And that was made available on May 22nd in an unedited draft form. And then on June 2nd, they published the Bureau's text. So I think that's short for bureaucracy's
Mm.
text. And even though they keep saying it's a member nation led process, it's clear that the nations are being led around by a hook or a ring in their nose, and they're headed in the way that the bureaucracy wants them to head. And the missing piece of the puzzle is that all of the documents that all of the nations submitted that got edited down into this 43-page bureau's text um, are hiding somewhere in what has been rumored to be a 208-page compilation document. So they're not letting us see what each nation proposed. They edited it and compiled it and put it into a shorter document. And in yesterday's meeting, it became pretty clear that a lot of the nations whose ideas were left on the editing, cutting room floor, so to
Mhm.
speak, they're like, well, wait a minute, who the hell are you to be editing what we said we want? This compilation document shows the true, wishes of all of the many nations. And so, Dave, transparency means you hide things from people, right? Isn't
Right.
that in WHO speak? That's what they're doing. They're changing the meaning of the word transparency by hiding the information. Now, that pales in comparison to what's going on with the proposed amendments to the international health regulations. They alluded to it a little bit. You got to like catch the little snarky statements here and there. Those were all submitted back in September. They published the original versions in mid-December, and then it has just been absolute silence. There's not been any revised version and so forth. And so what has happened is people in the media have confused all of the different versions of the treaty. And I just want to say to everybody, whatever the heck it is you think you know about the proposed pandemic treaty, throw it away if it isn't talking about this new Bureau's text with an awareness that there's a couple of hundred pages hanging out there somewhere that nobody knows anything about. The story about both of these is what's with the secrecy.
Yeah.
Let us know what's going on. Well, tied in with all of that, there's this one thing that's hidden in plain sight. And so let me share my screen now. Hopefully this will work. And Dave, you familiar with this thing from a couple of hundred years ago?
I've heard of the 10th Amendment. I don't know if anyone's really, practicing it
A lot of people
as
know
of.
the first and the second. I've been a proponent of the Fourth Amendment, which is, you're securing your person
Yeah.
and in your papers, which means nobody can make you stick something in your skin and
Hmm.
give paperwork to prove it.
Yeah.
So get up to speed on the Fourth Amendment. But the 10th Amendment, this is really very important with what's going on here, because the WHO and all of these documents, ultimately where the rubber hits the road is, how does it get implemented locally? Because over the last 4 years, Tedros didn't knock on your door and tell you that you've got to get jabbed, or, if your child went to school or you tried to get on a plane or whatever. It's people that you deal with in your life locally, in your state, in your county, in your city, at your, where you do any kind of commercial activity, stores and so forth. And so the powers that are not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states or to the people, right? And so maybe you've seen the 18 enumerated powers of the federal government. Dave, I know it's early morning.
Mm.
Do you see the word healthcare in there anywhere? I've been looking. I've been looking through the. You got a pocket version of the Constitution. Does it say anywhere that the federal government has the right to? I'm trying to read even between the lines.
Yeah, no. You would have to do the old twisting like a pretzel to find something here, James. But I'm pretty sure there's nothing in there about healthcare. Pretty sure.
Okay, so here is a statement that is in. Well, I'm gonna go back up here. Um, we the people demand that our state government officials defend states' rights and state sovereignty and protect our individual rights and freedoms against overreach by the federal government in response to international agreements with the WHO. Now, this is an excerpt from the International Health Regulations. And what happened is in 2005, when the there were quite a large number of amendments, and it's a new version that we've been dealing with for 18 years. I'm going to be a little bit boring, and I'm going to read some of this, okay?
Okay.
The mission, meaning the mission to Geneva, by way of this note, informed the Director General that the United States of America accepted the international health regulations, but subject to a reservation, right? They said, well, it's all good, except, we got to let you know about this.
Yeah.
So the mission to Geneva, by means of this note, um, submits the following reservation on behalf of the government of the USA. Now, interestingly enough, they missed the 18-month deadline and they submitted this a month later, and it still got into the document. So I'm not really sure if this is legit or if it's just there for show, because it came in late. So be it.
Hmm.
Um, the government of the USA reserves the right to assume obligations under these regulations in a manner consistent with its fundamental principles of federalism. So back in 2007, when they submitted this, they knew that they didn't necessarily have all of the authority to do that. With respect to obligations concerning the development, strengthening, and maintenance of the core capacity requirements set forth in Annex 1, essentially the IHR told the nations, look, you've got to agree to build out your healthcare industry so that you've got core capacities to deal with an emergency, right? You do
Right.
that how you want. These regulations shall be implemented by the federal government or the state governments as appropriate
Hmm.
and in accordance with our Constitution.
Ah.
Sounds okay so far, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Um, um, to the extent that the implementation of these obligations comes under the legal jurisdiction of the federal government. Well, hold on just a minute. I don't know. I got to go back up here. Um, uh,
Yeah.
okay, they can borrow money,
Yeah, and they
right?
do that a
They can
lot.
borrow money. They can establish taxes, right? So,
Yeah.
all right, maybe well, that actually means something, right? This is my favorite sentence in the international health regulations. To the extent that such obligations come under the legal jurisdiction of state governments, the federal government shall bring such obligations with a favorable recommendation to the notice of the appropriate state authorities.
Excuse
Okay.
me. Got a little
Hey,
suggestion over here. That
and
does.
you know what? And you know what? We just coined a bunch of digital money over here. If you guys play nice and do what we want you to do, here's a whole bunch of money.
Wow.
That's how it works.
Yeah.
That's how it works,
Sounds like a
people. Okay.
bribe to me.
There's a little something going on in Collier County, throwing money back at the federal government, saying, "Hey, we don't want your money. We're going to do what we want to do." So, but
Right.
that's how the game is played.
Yeah,
All
it's
right.
right down the road
Well,
for me. Yeah.
okay. Now here's something that just nobody really. Why in the world would anybody be aware of this? Okay. So Article 4 in the International Health Regulations, responsible authorities. Dave, have you ever met a responsible authority figure? Anyways,
What are
back
we? Are
in
we talking? This is this a show of oxymorons? Is that what this is going to be? Go ahead. Sorry. Or
that
just
could be a whole show.
morons. It could be morons or it could be ox. I'm sorry. Just continue.
So 18 years ago, the international health regulations required each state party, meaning each nation, member of the WHO, shall designate or establish a national IHR focal point. That's
Mm.
an office, right?
Okay.
Um, and the authorities responsible within its respective jurisdiction for the implementation of health measures under these regulations. So I'm going to guess nobody's heard about the National IHR Focal Point.
No.
Their job is essentially to surveil, not necessarily people, but surveil the data coming in. Oh, there's an outbreak of something strange in this state or that state or this city or that city. And okay, this, something abnormal is going on. There's an increase in death rates. There's an increase in disease rates. Oh, look at that. People are dying suddenly. We better tell the WHO, right? I'd love to have help. I would love to have help with people from people to put in FOIA requests to
Yeah.
access the data that is supposed to be flowing through the national IHR focal point, right? There's an
Right.
office in the Health and Human Services Department, and all of that data, if there's any abnormalities in the data,
Mm-hmm.
they are supposed to be letting the WHO know. And
Mm.
so if anybody wants to help doing FOIA requests to see, well, is the National IHR Focal Point Office sharing abnormal data, high rates of this, that, or the other disease with the WHO? And maybe the WHO just isn't bothering to do anything about it. Or, maybe the National IHR Focal Point is not collecting that data and not finding any abnormalities. There's a data stream there that I want to pursue. If anybody wants to help, give me a phone call. My phone number is 310-619-3055. All right. So, Dave, I'm going to introduce you to a new three-letter agency, right?
No.
The FBI, the CIA. All right. We got a new one in town.
No.
This is for real. I'm
No.
not making this up, Dave. The Division of Health and Human Services Secretary Operations
Sock.
Center, the SOC.
And
Okay.
it is a sock puppet. Perfect.
This is
Perfect.
this is where the WHO, if they were to adopt amendments,
Mm-hmm.
the sock puppet that would
Wow.
implement it in the United States would be the Health and Human Services Secretary's Operations Center. Dave, you just can't make this stuff
Yeah,
up.
if you
You just got to
remember
shine light on
anything, if you remember anything about this video that we're doing right now, James, it's going to be this.
it. Okay, so a lot of words from their website, right? You can do a search. You can do a search for HHS, not sock puppet, but HHS National IHR focal point.
The
All right.
sock
So
maintains various
Dave,
levels.
Dave, it's a Russian conspiracy on
Oh,
spreading It gets better, Dave. You
I
can't
didn't
make this stuff
expect
up.
this. I
That's how
didn't.
you do good video, right? You
Yeah.
never expect. You got to keep them guessing.
Right.
Um, in the proposed amendment to the international health regulations, Russia proposed, and this goes all the way back to September. They made it public in December, but nobody seems to want to talk about it,
Right.
right? Article 4 is what we showed before. It's where each party shall designate or establish the national IHR focal point. Well, anything underlined here and in bold is new text, that is being proposed by Russia. So little change in the first section. It used to say each state party shall designate or establish an IHR focal point. Well, they want it to be an entity. Well, whenever I hear entity, I think like demons and stuff like that. But it's an entity with a role. So they want to expand it to not just be a small thing. They want it to be, a pretty big three-letter agency, right?
Yeah.
But here's the new part, and this I hope the nuance does not escape people. It's not that the WHO is going to be giving orders to you and I. The WHO is going to be giving orders, and I'll just read it. States parties, meaning nations, shall enact or adapt their legislation to provide national IHR focal points with the authority and resources to perform their functions, clearly defining the tasks and functions of the entity with a role of national IHR focal point in implementing the obligations under these regulations, right? It's the implementing or enacting legislation that could easily be like 3,000 pages long, right? I'm just going to
Wow.
read this one more time.
Yeah.
States parties shall enact or adapt their legislation. That could be regulations, maybe that could be executive orders, they'll
Hmm.
take the easy path. Or it could be some monstrous piece of legislation that has some cool acronym, like Sock Puppets Unite or something like that.
Hmm.
Right? And it just drops into Congress one day. Boom, they pass it like they did, a couple of days before Christmas in 1913 to get the Federal Reserve in. Pay attention for what the federal government might in the future attempt to do. Enact legislation to provide the national IHR focal point with the authority and resources to perform their function. And at the end, implementing the obligations under these regulations. And so the take home message is they don't have the authority to tell us what to do on the federal level. They have the authority to throw money at the states and have the states enact legislation to implement whatever this is. And so that sock puppet, the SOC,
Yeah.
it is in line, right? If that was, man, if that was a corporation, I'd be buying stock in the SOC right now. It looks like it's headed up, right? It looks like that agency would have, they're going to grow that thing, enormously, kind of like the CDC, kind of like the FDA. It's a sub agency in the HHS. What we need to pay attention to, and what I'm hoping to work on, and the message from all of this is, if anyone watching this is a state focused activist, I don't care if you live in California, South Carolina, Tennessee, Florida, Texas, New York, whatever, um, the battle is coming home. And what the idea is that if they can craft legislation on state levels to implement all this crazy stuff that they want to do, that's coming, people. That's where we got to get organized to stop this. Now, there might be some states who are a little bit more, supportive of, keeping the federal government out of their face. But that's what this is about. We're pushing back on the WHO and all of this, but they're busy implementing everything already. Report after report after report, whether it's their laboratory network or their pathogen surveillance network or their global digital health certification network, they've made it clear that the analogy that I've given a couple of times is if you had a handful of people over at your house and you're like, hey, I'm going to order a pizza. What do you guys want on the pizza? Right. And then you just called and ordered the pizza and told them to put whatever it is you wanted on the pizza, and it's being delivered. By the time the people in your house figured out what it was they wanted on the pizza, it would show up. And you go, hey, I ordered the pizza. I was just kidding. I don't really care what you want. Here's your pizza. People are going to eat it. And so the WHO is busy building all of the things that are being negotiated.
Yeah.
Well, it's a fraud. It's a charade. They know where they want to go. They're doing it. The beast system is being built. And I'm hoping to help and work with a lot of people to build the resistance to that. And it's going to be sketchy for them. It might get implemented with the greatest of ease in some nation on the planet. It might get implemented and enforced in this, that, or the other state in the United States. But there are going to be pockets of resistance that we need to feed and grow and organize. And so, hey, everybody, Russia, 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 right? It, it's it's not anything other than the people who have a view of the world, who have infiltrated our government, who would
Mhm.
be supportive of passing legislation to empower, some office in the federal government or some office in the state government. These are the people that we need to stop from making it seem. Now, one of the things that a lot of people say, and I'll wrap it up with this, is, oh, they can't do that, right? They can't pass that law because it's unconstitutional. Well, just change that phrase just a little bit. We can't let them pass these unconstitutional laws. They've clearly shown that they can and will enact legislation on every level that is abusive to our rights. And they've been doing it in many nations, in many cities and states and so forth. There isn't a prevention of bad law,
Right.
right? Unless we, the people, say, no, that's a bad law, and we're going to rally, opposition to it so it never gets enacted, into or voted in as legislation. Um, but there are plenty of laws on the books that are clearly, abhorrent to the Bill of Rights and the Constitution,
Mhm.
but they did get enacted. So please don't say they can't do it. Say we can't allow them to do that. And then I think everybody can be in agreement, because to just say, oh, that'll never happen, right? They'll never do that. It's like, well, if you just sit back and let them do it, believe me, they're going to do it.
Right.
And so um, this is something that is a local issue. There are groups, all around the country that once they understand that states have the authority to stand up to the federal government and nullify whatever the federal government may attempt to do that is in violation of the 10th Amendment. Um, People have to stand up for their individual freedoms and rights, and collectively, as a state, we all need to stand up to the federal government against an encroachment which just keeps coming and coming and coming and coming and coming. So
Yeah.
that's my story for today, Dave.
All right. Well, Tip O'Neill was the guy who said that all politics are local. So there you go. Just to fill in that punchline from the beginning. James, thank you so much for all that information. You're welcome back anytime. I'm sure there's going to be additional installments on this coming as we, again, try to stop the New World Order and the WHO and losing our rights as individuals. But I appreciate you coming on with us today.
And anybody who wants to join in on this, just give me a phone call, 310-619-3055. Leave me a text message, or, Signal or Telegram or WhatsApp, get connected. If I'm on the phone and I don't pick it up, I'll call you back, 310-619-3055.
All right, there you go. He just doxed himself again, like always. Thanks, James.
Thank you.